Welcome to the webinar on Follow the Money with Fee Tracking. I'm Beth Elliott, and I'm your trainer today. And we'll be going over how to use MMS Generation's fee tracking to follow money in your system. And this can be anywhere from tuition charges to late book fees, whatever you'd like to work with. So once my database is up, all right. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the fee tracking setup. And we do that under Admin, Database Configuration. In here, there is a fee tracking tab, and you set it up for the currency, whether you want to see the USD, US dollars, beside the amount that you have, and you can indicate whether you want to see it before or after, or not at all. You can say how many decimal places, thousands and decimal separators. And then at the bottom, you can also set up where you want to put your, if you want to print numbers on your receipts, and if you want to save a copy of the receipts to a PDF file, and if so, in what folder. Now, whether you're right here in your work folder, or you can click the three dots, the ellipsis, go into your area and set up a separate folder for that. That's entirely up to you. So you might want to create your own folder for this, and I can come in and do that, or I can go into my work folder and put it right in the fees one or create one. So it gives you that ability to set it up for you. The next step in doing the setup for fee tracking is we're going to come in under fees on the left, and we're going to go more fee tracking editing jobs, and we're going to edit the debit credit codes. And what this is a list of both the debits, the charges against the students, and the credits or the payments or the offsets. So it is a 3-character code, letters or numbers, your choice. You have a description, and we can fix the spelling here a little bit. You can indicate the fee type of whether it's a debit or a credit, and you can set a dollar amount for it, or you can leave it as 0 and fill it in when you use that particular code. To the right of that, there's a debit account and a credit account column. These are for your general ledger system. Sorry. So the debit and credit accounts are for your general ledger system. And you can set up your numbers any way you want to match that system. You would use the yellow plus at the top to add another code, in which case you would give it a code here, click OK, give it a description, put in at least the first 3 columns, because if you don't fill in an amount, you can do it later. And you can have as many of these as you want. When you come down into something like tuition charges, you can opt whether you want just an overall payment. You can have different charges depending on the amount, and you can change that dollar amount or change the description so you know what you're working with. In here, what they've done is the first 2 characters are basically the type of what this is, and then the last character, the C or the P, is indicating whether it is a charge or a payment. But you can use whatever scheme works for you for setting up the codes. You want to get a print of those codes, you can either write from the editor, go to the printer button. The default is it will highlight all of them, but you can do debits only, credits only, or pick which ones. Right now the list is sorted by the code, but you can also sort it by the description. And then you just go ahead and print. This can be output to a PDF, an Excel sheet, or a text file, so that you can then work with that if you needed to have it for reference somewhere else. So it does give you that option to be able to put things in. You can also print this report by going under Fees, More Fee Tracking Reports, and come down and do the debit credit codes listing. Now, with working with the debit credit codes, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and put in some fees for an individual student. So the simplest way is just going to click on the little fee button. Now, this is the student fee editor. You can also get there by coming under fees and click the top item, which is the edit student fee tracking records. In here, you have a list of items that the charges or credits that the student has worked with, the code, the description coming from the code. There it's set up to have a quantity and an amount, and the total amount, which is the quantity times the amount, and then the status of the D or the C for debit or credit. In here, you can also add transaction comments, which is a drop-down list that you can set up. So here it was a field trip and they went to the Carnegie Science Center. Now to fill in that list of comments, you would go under Fee, More Fee Track Editing Jobs, and we would come down and edit the transaction comments. It is a 3-character code, letters, numbers, and anything else you'd like to put in there. And then you can put in a description that goes with it. So whether it's where the field trip went, and overall just a charge, or things like daycare or after-school programs, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to use the save and exit to get out, and you can work with that. As we come across for this area for the student account, there's an area for a note, and you could use the note rather than the transaction comment. The transaction comment is a canned area, so you don't get to change it on the fly. The note, you can put in whatever you want. Now that note can grow as big as you need. The physical limit per note is 1 gigabyte. As we continue right, they have this solid line here is sort of a split screen for you. So after we worked with the note, the next thing up is our invoice number that gives you the ability to put one in. And then there is another set of dates. One is the deposit date of when you deposited the payment that came in, a posting date versus the actual transaction date. So the transaction might have been on a Sunday and the posting is on a Monday. So you're working with, what time it happens. You can also put in your check date. The closed is indicating whether their transaction is closed. I'm going to go ahead and show my closed transactions. And what that gives me is if I look at the ones at the top and I come back to the left, I have a tuition charge for $325, and then I have a tuition payment for $325. That pairing zeroes out. So I'm going to close it because I have a nice pairing and I have a zero balance for those areas. The reason I want to do that is as I look at the list of what the student has, I'm seeing all the information of what's out here. And there's some of this that it's like, oh, okay, that's what I have. But, when you have a lot of these payments and so on, that it starts getting busy here. So if I don't show my closed transactions, I'm only going to show what's still open. So if I take this January pair of the charge and the payment, I can come to the right and close both of those. And then it takes it out of the list. So I only have the other information that's here. The source of the transaction is whether this was a mass edit or if it came in from another area. This could be a billing template that was posted, whether it's from the pending transactions or other areas. It might even say user, so that the user filled in the amount. So it gives you different areas that you can look at as to how that action came in. So it does give you that option. If I need to look at other family members, based on the family code in the biographic, I can see the other family members that are related, and I can very quickly go to them and see what's going on. And then also come back. And there might be more than one family member. At the bottom, it's going to give you your balance. For different areas, you have other year's balance versus the current year. Now, the other years, it's not just a prior balance because it could be a future balance. I could be coming toward the end of the current school year, and some of what I'm looking at in the other balance could be that it's the registration fee for the following school year. So it gives me that ability to go in and look. And then I have an overall total balance based on the date that we specify. Now you can click on this date and move it. So I can go through, say, the end of the school year, in which case my balance can change. Because I have, coming up in February, I have a field trip charge that has not been paid. So it's letting me see what's going on, which makes it really handy. Now, if I had a payment, I do have the ability to print a receipt. So I just click on that button to print the receipt. I highlight which of the items I want to pay. It happens to be the only credit that's out there. I can opt to include the parent name and address. And if I do, it wants to know which parent, which contact that I want to work with. I do not have access to the mailing flag here, so I do have to be specific as to which one I want to work with. Or I can opt not to print it at all. I can also print the current account balance, so I see what's still owed at that point. You can bring in an optional biographical field. Some schools might need to bring in the grade level of the student. So I can specify the grade level and bring that in, and then I can fill in the address of my school. And if I go ahead and print, I'm going to be able to see that receipt. So I see the student name, the parent name and address, the ID number of the student, which is the account number, the grade level heading and actual grade level that I specified, the date that I'm working with this, the school. School name is going to come from the license of the school that you're in. And then you have the extra address line. And that's going to show you the information that's here. The reference happens to be your check number. And then we said, yes, I want to see the total. The extra pair of columns on the right is going to be if there was a credit balance. So it gives you the option to be able to see that. And then just scroll down and that's what's there. And you can go straight to your printer and close. Now, when we set up the database configuration, we did say we wanted to put a number on our receipts. And so we have a number up at the top. And then you close out. And the option to save copies of this receipt was enabled. Do we want to save this receipt? And we can say yes, in which case it now put a file there. And it's letting me know it doesn't exist. Okay. So I'm going to change the configuration, the database configuration, so it goes into my staff folder. Since that seemed to be where it wanted to put it. So if I come in back into the fee editor, let's see if it'll print this time. Thank you. And so it outputs it and puts it in your work folder. And I can go ahead and press OK to continue. And exit out. Now, if I want to add in, say that there was a payment on the field trip charge, I just go up to the yellow plus. indicate that it's going to be the field trip. So I'm just going to type in F so I can get to my field trip payment. And it could be that it'll default to the current date when you come in here. The field trip payment had a default amount, so it filled it in already for me. And I can even indicate here that it was for the field trip to the Carnegie Science Center. And I can add a note or not if this was paid with a check, or maybe it was cash, so I can put that in as the check number. And then I can fill in the rest of the information as needed, and it indicates that it was the user entered. So as easy as that to get something in. Now we had an area where there was a note for the specific fee tracking transaction. There is also a fee note that is overall for the student account. So this might be a notation of the fact that the parents are splitting, say, the tuition and who's paying what. There might be some other notation that you want to put in here, but it does give you an area that allows you to put in a note that is not specific to an individual transaction. Do remember that these notes are part of the student record, and therefore they can be subpoenaed and go to court. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Okay. So next up is maybe we want to put in a different field trip for a bunch of students. So I'm going to save and exit out of here, and I'm going to come in under Fees, Operations, and I want to be able to put in and post transactions. So I want to do a mass edit of the information. Okay. So I can post pending transactions. Excuse me. I wanted to go down and do the mass add, edit, delete fee tracking records. So in here I can mass add, edit, or delete either the transactions, the billing templates, or the pending transactions. So I could come in and say, we're coming up, let's put in a trip coming up. It's going to be another field trip. It's going to be 1. I can put in the amount, only maybe for this one because it's the holidays, it's a higher amount. It's going to be a debit, and I can come in if need be and put in where they're going. Okay? And it might even just be an indication that they're due the day before the event. And as we continue right, you can also put in all this other information. And I'm going to add the note that it's going to the they're going to the New York City Macy's parade. They're going to have fun. So you can come in and specify what's going on. There is the ability to ignore duplicate entries. So if the student already had this transaction date and code for this amount, then if it already existed, it's not going to put another one out there. At this point, I can do a student range to specify who I want to work with. And I can opt that I'm going to deselect everyone and just do the seniors. So I'm going to select all. I sort it in year of grad order. I'm going to go to 2017 and hold my control key and deselect everyone else. Or this might be going where it's only certain students rather than the entire class. So I have that capability to be able to come in and specify the students that I want. So instead of doing a range, I could deselect all, come back up to the top, and I can now pick the students that this is going to apply to. Now some of this I'm just scrolling down to be able to pick the students, or I could click in the list, type the beginning, and do a control space to put the space in and start my new search, and continue that to putting the students in. Then I click OK and I process. That's what I'm about to apply. I can say yes, and it's going to run through and put those 7 students in. Now, if we realized that we had to edit what was there, I could come in and say, oh, for the 15th, there was a mistake on the amount. Still the field grid, it's still 1. This was what it was coming from, and I need to change it. So maybe the date was different, or the amount changed, that instead of $10, it was going to be $7.50. And all the rest of the information is the same. So I can match up the first record and add in the second record. So it gives me the ability to put that in, and I can go ahead and say, oh, for anyone who's there. Now, if I didn't have a range already, I could be at all students, and only if they match this record are they going to change this and make it the second record. So it's letting me know that it wants to do that, and it went in and changed those 7 records. So even though it processed all students, it only changed the 7 that matched. So that's the easiest way to get your records in. You'll notice there's a couple more tabs here. One is for billing templates and one is for pending transactions. And that's what we're going to be going over next. So I'm going to exit out of here, and we're going to go set up billing templates, which means I need to set up the billing schedule first. So under fee tracking, I'm going to go to more fee tracking editing jobs, and I'm going to edit the billing schedule. A billing schedule is where I can take an amount and split it out into multiple areas, and that could have up to 24. So I could do it like every 2 weeks if I needed to. You set up a date that it's going to be due and what the percent is of the total amount. And that percentage can't go over 100%. But I can come down here, and it might be that they were starting on the monthly plan here, which has 8 payments that they started in April, they started in September, and then in April they owe the balance. But they might opt that instead of having the 30% at the end, you might want to start with the 30% and then go to the 10% when you're done. So it just gives you a way to spread out the point payments. So maybe I have a quarterly type payment. So I'm going to add a new record, put in quarterly, and I can come in and I can use the same due date, only now I'm going to be 25%. And it could be that it's, bi-monthly instead. Oops. Now, it's very good about this. It's saying, I'm coming down, and it's like, wait a minute, you just put a date earlier than the one entered before, so I have to change my date. So it's going to let me know when I mistype when I'm setting this up. Now I'm here in the end of the year, and so I need to go to the beginning of this area for entering the date. So I'm going to use my home key to go to the beginning of the field, and then I can type in the dates that I want and put my 25%. Now they don't have to all be the same. It just gives you a way to put those in. And I might opt that I want to come in and change this. So now I have 2 different plans I can work with, or I can add as many different plans as I want. This was the monthly plan here was an 8-month area. There might be one that's a 9-month. There might be a different one that's 6 months, depending on what I need to work with. You could also work with different dates of when is the due date. Is it the first week of the month? Is it the last week of the month? Is it somewhere different? Depends on what works. You can have as many of these billing plans, billing schedules as you want. And it just allows you to have so the parents can see when things are due, or you can actually post from here. So I'm going to save and exit out of here. And actually, if I wanted to print this, I just hit the printer button. I can pick one or more of the plans. I can start a new page when the schedule changes. But all this does is it just lets me see how many billings I have and what sort of percentages I have. You could also print that by going under Fees, More Reports, and print the billing schedule. Next up, we're going to work with the billing template. So back under Fees, More Fee Tracking Jobs, I'm going to come in and edit the billing templates. The templates use the schedule. So I have 3 different tuition areas here. They're just labeled tuition 1 to 3. They're all on the monthly plan. And the difference is going to be the amount or which tuition they're working with. Because you could have different tuition amounts depending on whether it's the first child, the second child, multiple children, whether it's a faculty child, different areas like that. And you can put in up to 12 different charges that can go against this. And then when you view the billing template or the billing schedule, it's going to take that overall dollar amount and split it out to the different dates with the percentage that you specified. So it gives you a nice, easy way to show them this is what's due and this is when it's due. So if I look at the tuition 2, instead of tuition 1 was the $3,500, tuition 2 was $3,250, tuition 3 was $3,000. So there's a different amount each time, and I could opt in the description here to actually put that in. And I can also come in and say, oh, I have another one. So I'm going to do my QTQ one, so it's still tuition quarterly. And I can pick that plan. I can come over here and select the tuition charge. So now when I look at my billing template, I still have the same total, but it's been modified because now it's going to take that amount and split it in quarters rather than tenths, or 30% as the case may be. So it gives you a different way to work with that. And there might be some other residual charge that I need to put in here that goes with that. So maybe there's an insurance charge that's also going to be on this one. And now when we come over to the billing schedule, we're going to see the total, the $3,530, and the fact that this amount now gets changed because you added that extra $30 in. Now, if it's not something that needs to be spread across the multiple time frames, you don't have to put it in the template. But that insurance card might have been $300 rather than, 30. So even though there's an amount that comes with the code, you can always change that amount. So it's not like you're locked into that dollar amount that's in the code. So now that we have these, we can again print them. You can do a new page when the template changes. You can print a detail of the billing. Actually, let me do it without first, and then we're going to leave them in code order. So when I look here, the detail is just going to show me I'm on this schedule and here's the total. So this is just overall what's included with that template. If I include the detail, I'm going to go to a new page. Now when I print, here's the total, but now it's going to give me the schedule dates. So I could print this and hand it off to the parent so that they have an idea of this is when the amounts are due. And I can use the schedule just for that item. So up at the top, it gives me the split of the different items I'm putting here, and then below that, it gives me the detail of the schedule. So it makes it handy to be able to give that to parents. So now that I have this information, I'm going to save and exit out of here and go back into my student. At this point, I can come into the billing templates for the student and I can add one in. This student is on the second one. So if I print, I'm going to print this particular student's fee tracking record, and I want to include the billing template. I don't have to give the debit credit records. I just want to print the billing template for this student. And I can include and print for students and families together. I can opt to bring in the parent name and address, and I can start a new page for each student. I'm not going to do that for this family. I only have the two. So when I print, I'm going to see the first student and their template, and then I'm going to see the second student. So I have both Christine and Amy. So I can see what's going on with that and see where they're at. Just gives me that nice area where I can come in and see what's going on. Okay. Pending transaction is when we take the billing template and actually put them in as tentative. So here we're doing the charge rather than the credit. So we're being able to put them in on a timely basis. So to set those up, I would come in under Fees, Operations, and I'm going to post the pending transactions. So this allows me to say for this date range, for these billing templates that have been assigned to students, so basically my beginning of December items, I want to process. So it's whenever you want the pending transactions for rain to become billable items. So if I want to take them from the pending and put them into the student area, that's where those go. The other thing under the pending is I can come in here with a schedule if I want. I can just come in with a code and an amount. So maybe I had a gym uniform equipment and I just want to create the transaction. So it's just going to add it here and say what I want to work with it. So I can come in. Now something like this where it's only $10, I probably wouldn't do it as a billing item because I don't need to spread it across 4 items. But for the bigger items, I can do that. Okay. You can also come in under the Fees, Operations, and do the mass edit fee tracking records. Only this time, instead of the actual student transactions, we can come into the billing templates. And I can come in and say, oh, I want to apply this template with the amount is how I set it up to specific students. So I can deselect everyone, come in and come down here and say, okay, Samantha Ramsey and whoever else I need to select, I can go ahead and process that. And that would give that template to her. So I can just process, I'm about to mass edit that template. It's going to let me do it. The student pending transactions is where I can enter something into the pending. So the one I had started to do is I'm going to put it in that coming up in February, actually let's make it March, we're going to do a field trip because that was the one that was coming up. Now, because it's pending, it doesn't have all the notes area, but it still allows me to do it. And the MAS is letting me know that I did it as a mass edit. So I can go ahead and process that. So it makes it nice to be able to put those in there. Okay. If I want to go from the billing template into the student account or the pending account, I do that under Fees, Operations, and I'm going to generate the student billing template transactions. This is going to allow me to take the template that I have. I can do a date range, and that includes first to last if need be, but it will always default to the current date. And then it allows me to come in and say, oh, I want to go next month, do it through the end of the year, and I can either put them into the pending area or I can opt to put them straight into the student account instead. So it just depends on whether I want to work with a pending area or not. The student account is going to show immediately that that's part of what's there, and depending on the statement that I do, it's going to give me that information, where if it's in pending, it's hovering out there, but it's not there just yet. But this is what was used to put the billing transactions into the pending area. So I again can do a student range, and then I would process. But that makes it nice to be able to do that. Now for ease, when we were working in the student account, we had the tuition charge where it was split out into the different amounts. Some schools prefer to just see the one lump area. They want it all up there at the beginning of the year. Now you can still split it out into different charges if you'd like, or you can just show the $32.50. The difference would be is that you wouldn't be able to necessarily to close the transactions until all of it has been paid. But it does give you that area that you can look at. Okay. Now, if I need to clear a charge, if I decide that it was something that wasn't or shouldn't be here, I can just go ahead and highlight the code, the line, go up to the red X. We also, under the fees operations under the mass edit, that also included a delete function. So if I'd put something out because we were planning to go on a field trip, and then something occurred at the location we were going to, we could then delete it and go from there. Especially if no money had been received yet. You can also clear fee tracking records. And what this does is it lets you say which kind you want to clear, and do you want to see the student's information before they're cleared. So if I come in here, deselect everyone, and I just look at Heidi Arena. Okay. Didn't like the way I checked. There we go. I can say I want to clear her transactions, but I do want to view the records before they're cleared. And what that means is when I hit process, it's going to give me the ability to see what's here and to decide whether I want to clear or not clear. Okay, so it's letting me know that this information it's showing me is going to be lost if I hit the clear record, and there is no undelete. That undelete was if you were in the Visual Fox Pro version. But the SQL version doesn't have the option to do an undelete. Okay, so then you would have to put them back in again. If you just exit, you don't do the clear or the not clear. And in any of these, if you want more information, you can always go to the question mark, and that's going to bring up help. And it knows exactly where you are. So it knows I'm in fee tracking and I'm clearing the student fee tracking records. So it's going to bring up information on that. Okay. And then I can scroll down in some areas for things like the student range. I can click on the Learn More and then be able to work with this on how to do a range of students, how to select students one at a time or non-adjacent sections of students. So it gives me some information about this of how to work with it. And I can come in and look at other areas. Here's my mass delete, and I have it on the different areas of what I want to work with. So it makes it really handy to be able to come in and work with that. And I can come into my pending, highlight the line I want to work with, and individually delete here. And your delete will always ask you, do you want to delete? And you have the option to say no. So you can put that in there. Okay? So next up, we're going to print some of the reports that we can with the student. So under fees, we're going to start by printing a transaction register. The transaction register gives me the ability for a specific date or a range of dates to print based on which date am I checking. Am I checking the transaction date, the deposit, posting, or check dates? So I can say, give me all of the codes for this month, and I'm going to sort it by the code, and I'm going to go ahead and print. So it's going to run through and show me what I have. So I have one student who had the field trip on the 24th, and everybody else had their debits coming in on the 4th of the month. So it lets me see what's going on with that. So it's a nice quick way. Now this is only going to show me the student ID number. The intent here is if I was doing something like a deposit, I'd want to be able to reconcile what's going on. And depending on who's seeing it, I don't want to show too much information. So that's why we only show the student ID here. But it gives me the ability to show that. And I can do the code, I can do it by date, I can do it by the current filter, in which case it's going to be alphabetic based on the student range. So if I go back and look, I have the 3 transactions here for the student because I'm showing all of it now. And so I have my debit, my credit, and my other credit. So it lets me see what I'm working with on a student basis. So it just gives me actions to be able to do. And I can save the settings, which means I don't have to reset it up each time. And then the next time in, you hit the recall settings, and you can work with that. We'll be doing more with the save settings when we get into the statements and such. Your save settings, by the way, will never include the date range or the student range, just the rest of the setup. Also under fees, you have the fee tracking statements. And what the statements do is for a date range, and the default is the current date back a month. Now a statement by default has both debits and credits. You can do receipts, which are your credits only, or you can do invoices, which are your debits only. You can include a statement message, and you set those up by going under fees, more fee tracking, editing jobs, and edit the statement messages. The message can include up to 4 address lines. So you could put the name of your school, other information, and then what's going on here. Now this will appear on the bottom of the statement. This appears up in the header. So it's just a way to see what's going on. The default for most of these reports is you're going to group family members for the report. So I'm getting one statement for all the students in the family. You can print the transaction comments on the report. You can even include your closed transactions on the report. And the default is to print the transactions for all school years, which means it's going to look at not only this school year, but prior school years. So if the student, or in the future, if the student owes money from a prior year, I could actually come in here and say, oh, I want to go back 3 years, and I might be going to August 1st. So if I go ahead and print, it's going to give me any information for those students going back those years. This lets you know that it's designed, when it prints the statement, to print in a number 9 double window envelope, and it gives you the size of that envelope. The header setup is what prints at the top, so you have the ability to have it say that it's a statement. You can include other information. You could also come in and say, oh, this is my November statement. whether you want to see the parent name and address. Now this, and you can have separate of whether the name and the address or not. You can opt to do the address without the name. You can opt to do the name without the address. You can also set it up for a specific contact or the mailing flag, which is those contacts that are set to send mail. So that can be handy if you have custodial and non-custodial parents, that it will do both out to them. You can bring in up to 7 additional biographical fields with their information. So again, we might be putting in the grade level. We might be bringing in county information or other information that I might need based on my state that I'm living in. The report details of which of the codes do I want to use, and by default it brings all of them forward to be printed. And this can look at multiple years. So you might see the same code twice if the description is a little different. So that's something to think on. By default, you're going to get a balance forward for all years. So I set it up for September or August 1st, 2012. So I will have a balance forward as of that date. If I don't do it for all years, I can say prior years or current year, and I can opt to print both of those. I can also say I want to see the account balance, and I have an option for either a debit or credit total, which will, those two combined will give me my account balance. The statement criteria is who do I want to see? No balance limit says give me everyone. I can do certain ones with a 0 balance because I might have a different message for those with a thank you for paying. I can do those with either a debit or a credit balance, and in which case the default is a penny. So if I have any kind of a balance, I want to see those students versus doing it with a credit balance or a debit balance, in which case I only see one of those as I go through. I'm going to go ahead and cut this down so I'm not printing everyone. And I can go ahead and print this. So here's the 3 lines. Actually, it was 4 lines from the message of what's coming in. That's coming from the header information or the setup that I specified. The account number is for the primary student, which in this case is the oldest, which is why Christine is here and not Amy. There's the grade level for Christine, the parent name and address. The tick marks here are where you would fold it, so you could put it in the double window envelope. And then below that you have the detail for both students, and we included the comments that we wanted to see. Okay. And then you have your debits, your credits, and you can see whether there's a balance or not for each of those students. And then you have the balance as of the ending date. And at the bottom, here's the rest of that message that you're seeing that you had when you set up your message. And then you go to the next student. And if need be, that particular, depending on what you have, it's going to go on to more than one page for what you're working with. So here's another family, and it lists both students, or all students as the case may be. What's really nice is your output option here gives you the ability to output this to a PDF, to an Excel sheet, but it also, if your user account is set up for email, it gives you the ability to report to email, and you can email these statements to those eligible for email, in which they have an email address and it says yes to send email. For only those students, you can do it for everyone, email where you can, paper otherwise. And you can also print a paper copy as well for your email recipient, so you still have a hard copy. The from email is going to be what is associated with your user accounts. The subject could be that it's the November statement. You can put some other message here if you choose. You can track the emails, in which case it'll create the ET for an email tracking, and then a random number, and then you can specify it's going to come into your work folder, and that's going to show you whether it went out as an email or a paper copy. You can click OK, excuse me, the subject. So it's letting me know that either my subject or the message body is empty. So I filled in the subject, I didn't do the message body. So it's letting me know. I can opt not to continue. So I can just put in whatever I need here. And I could include contact information. You know, if you have questions, here's who you let me know. And then that allows you to actually print. So it's going to run through, created the email, and then it will give you the option for the others. So the Appia teachees aren't here because they have a valid email address. But this is a contact that did not have an email address. So it lets me see that information. I could go ahead and close this. Now I could go straight to my printer. And if I have a PDF capture, even though I said give me the paper version, when I print the report, I can still go into a PDF, something like Do PDF if I want to. So it does give me that option. But there's the file. So I can go in and take a look and see what's in that file. So there's the text file. So it's going to show me the email, the ID number of the student and whether it went email or paper. This is not going to show you whether or not it was received. It's only going to show you which way it went. That's the intent of it. Okay. Now, if I only wanted to see those with a debit balance, I'm going to change this back to my preview. Now, when I print, I'm only going to have those students that had a debit based on the date range. And nobody had a debit based on that range because I only went through this time frame. So it gives me that option to work with. You can save the setting so that you can use it the next time you're in which case you can just go ahead and recall. The date range won't be changed, but the rest of the information here, it's not including the closed transactions. So if I look at Amy and her sister, when I print, the criteria is I want a debit balance. It's going to tell me there aren't any. I'm going to do it with no limit. So here's the balance forward as of that date, and then I have the field trip payment and what's coming up, you know, of where it referred to. So I only had a credit balance, not a debit balance. Here's where they brought in a couple of extra pieces of information. When I go back to the header, that's where they brought up the advisor or the guidance counselor and put in the phone number. So you can actually put in text without pulling in a biographical field. So it does give you that option to say what you want to work with. Now, if I go back and print, I only have the one record here for Amy because that's what's not closed. If I say print the closed transactions on the report, all the same setup, but now I start seeing here's my charge and payment, charge and payment. So I see the whole detail rather than just what's still pending or what's still out there. Other reports that you can run is there's the student record listing. We touched that a little bit from the student editor, but you can print the debit credit records, you can print the closed, you can include your transaction notes. So if I pick on just Amy again, when I print, I'm going to get the full detail and it's going to show me opened or closed. But it isn't necessarily giving me a balance, it's just saying here's the detail that you wanted to work with. So it lets me see what's going on. And I can do my pending transactions and I can do all of them, in which case now I see what's coming up. So if they want to know what's pending, what's coming up, because it isn't on my statement yet, you can actually print that out. And you can say what was the templates, and you can print all of it. In which case you now see the detail, you see what's pending and what template they're in. So that reminds them that they're on this template of what's going on. So it just gives you a way to pull all of that information in. Under reports, fee tracking reports, you can also come into an aging report, in which case you can see based on your 30, 60, 90 days, those that are over, those that are within certain time frames, all of them based on an ending date, that you can come in, group on the family. Again, you have all your codes. You can remove them all. You can move certain ones just by remove all or move all, depending on what you have. And you could have certain codes that are indicating that they are prior year payment rather than the current year payment, so that you can specifically state, yes, I'm paying against what was still owed from last year. So if I go ahead and print, it's going to run through, because I didn't shorten the student range, it's going to still group by family members, but it's going to run through and say who owes what and for how long. So for each of the students, it's going to give me their ID, what's in the 30, 60, 90 range and or over, and the total. So it lets me see that information, total debits, credits, total debits, so I have a feel for what's out there. So it just gives me a nice way to come in and take a peek. You have the account summary and totals report. So in here for the account summaries is you have your general setup, which is your date range. Now I can also use the little 2-day calendar thing and just sweep back. So if I want to do it from August 1st to November 30th, I can group by family members, I can print closed transactions, and I can do a new page. The student header is just, do I want to see the parent name and address? This time I have 3 additional items. You can, of course, still use in here, because of the type of report, it's not a statement, then I can't use the mailing flag. The fee code of which ones do I want, and then the details. Do I want to print a balance forward? Do I want to see the itemized debit credit? Do I want to print the totals, separate debit credit totals, a balance, grand totals? And then when I do the criteria, I can say whether there is a debit or credit account. And I can leave it as no criteria. So I'm going to cut this down. So when I print, this gives me for each of the students, here's the detail, because we were including the closed transactions, how much is still out there. So there is a credit balance, there's the debit and credit individual totals, and then the balance as of the ending date. It does that for each of the students. So I have a balance, and some of them I have a due. So there's none due for this student. And I can come in and just see that information. So just what do I need? So it makes it nice to be able to pull those information. And that's basically, there's a couple of other reports that are out there. Under fees, more reports. You can do a pending transaction report. You can do a billing statement. You can also build and print your general ledger report. And what's nice with this is it'll let you just build the transaction, so based on the date range that you want to work with. So if I wanted to do it, say, from October 1st to November 30th, I can put in an operator code, I can put in a department. These two combined end up being part of, or at least the operator code is part of my GL file for general ledger. Again, it goes into my staff folder. I can indicate the type of file I want to do if I want to output this to a file. And the advantage of this is when I build it is it gives me the ability to create that transaction file. So I'm going to do it with tabs. I can include transactions already posted, and I can say which ones I want to see. So what this allows me to do is, besides having the report, so it's just letting me know that I didn't do the file extension because it still showed it as a DBF. But here it lets me see overall for each of my debit credit codes that are in my general ledger what the dollar amounts are. So it built the file. So all it was telling me here is what I went into the text file, as I didn't change the file extension. Now it might not have anything because I didn't include the transactions already posted. So now it comes up with the same dollar amounts, and I can look at that file and then bring this text file into my general ledger system. So it does give you that option. The other thing in fees is you can post the fee accounts from an ASCII output file. What this does is, if you have an arrangement with the bank or other financial institution, they can send you a file, either a text file, or actually they're all text files, so just whether it's specified as a comma separate file or not, or versus just a text file. And you can bring that in once you've selected that file. So if I had a file out here, now this is not the actual file, but if I had one, I would be able to bring it in and see what's going on. And if I do the question mark for help, it's going to give me what's going to be in that file. So there are 7 fields that are going to be in there, and it has to be only 7. So the ID number of the student, the fee date and code, the quantity and amount, the check number if it exists, and the status would be a credit or a debit. So the bank or whoever can send you this file, now the fee code has to match what you have. If the bank has 25 and you have 025, that's 2 different things. So you want to be consistent. But it just means I'm going to suck it right in without having to do the actual manual work, which is really handy to be able to bring that in. And that will have a different file name for the status of the source, rather. It's not going to be user, it's not going to be mass, there'll be a different code that said it came in. Okay. You can also close your fee transactions under your operations. I want to close my completed transactions. And what this does by default is if the balance comes out to 0, it's going to close it. Now it's not going to pay attention to the credits, the debits, and the credits line up. It's just going to say if I come out to a 0, I'm going to close it. And you also have an option to close all of them for the selected dates. Okay. So there's a lot of nice things to be able to work with that. A couple I'm not going to go into detail, but I want to touch on is under the operations. There is the fee tracking mail merge and the telephone messaging. The telephone messaging gives you the ability to send out a phone message that says that based on a certain transaction that you want to be able to send a message to the parents. And the same with the fee under the mail merge. Now with the mail merge, there's a couple of different options here. I just want to touch on it briefly because you can do your aging or account summary or statements, but then you can also do the aging and account summary totals, one per family versus the individual statements, individual students. But the statements are set up to only print an individual transaction record, which is why the ability to do the email from the statement is much, much easier. I mean, it's handy if you were doing, say, a field trip letter, but not necessarily if you're trying to get your overall balance. Now, if I go into the biographic briefly, because I've talked a bit about the families and one per family, the one for a family is based on the family ID. Now, if I right-click in here, I can see the members of the family, so I can see who's involved. And that's based on my school and or my multi-school group. So if I'm in a multi-school group and I have family members in more than one school, then I can see that in the multiples. The other in the contacts is whether they are, the mailing flag is this mail up here. And then the email, if they are eligible for email, is they would have an email address and a yes to send mail, send email. But that's where it's going to be working from.